Crowley's attempt to start a new religion in the Abbey of Thelema had gone disastrously wrong. His reputation as the wickedest man in the world was sealed. The last years of the great beast's life were spent living from hand to mouth. His fortune was long gone, and his disciples had deserted him. He moved from one set of temporary lodgings to another, and finally ended up in a boarding house in Hastings. His life of excess had left him with nothing but chronic heroin addiction and infamy.
Jeff Lou's come and gone, and there's almost like an irony to it that he's come here really where old people die. The great beast, 666, the wickedest man in the world, is now residing in a boarding house, you know, with a lot of other old people. He's been through absolute hell and back, you know. He's danced with the devil and he's come back again. And is he a wise old man, or is he a sad, lonely heroin addict in a room?
In 1934, Crowley began a libel case against a writer who described him as a black magician. He was desperate for money and believed he might be awarded damages. Examples of Crowley's pornographic poetry were read out in court, and then the wife of Rao Loveday, the young man who died in the Abbey of Thelema, gave evidence of Crowley's depravity. The judge was appalled, saying that in 40 years of justice he had never heard of such wickedness. Crowley lost the case and ended up bankrupt. But even after such a humiliating defeat, his extraordinary magnetism was undiminished.
After a court case that Crowley loses, a young woman called Deirdre McKellen comes up to him and says, "I want to have your child," basically. And Crowley agrees, and they go off together, and they perform a ritual to have a magical son, a sort of a magical heir for Crowley. And they perform various rituals, and they do have this son, and his name is Aleister Crowley.
Well, after he took me in his arms on the doorstep, that beastly lodging which had lace curtains in the window, I don't know where it was now, he said, "I want you and I want your child." Well, I wanted a child, and I just started from then. And then he came round and saw me off, and he had to give up drugs, pretty well give up drugs for 6 months, 3 months, because he couldn't conceive very easily. Well, I suppose I conceived, he did the other thing, but...
That was the only child who, in the everyday concept, I think he really loved, whom he wanted to see have a future. It wasn't until the end of his life that I really think he came into contact with the kind of love most men would have wanted.
Perhaps for the first time, Crowley was beginning to question what his life had really amounted to.
Have I ever done anything of value, or am I a mere trifler, existing by a series of shifts of one kind or another, a wastrel, a coward, a man of straw? I can find no answer whatsoever, the obvious verdict being guilty every time.
From an early age, Crowley had been obsessed with sex. He came to believe that it was the key to magical fulfillment. So when he wrote in his diary, "Weak erection," he knew that the end was near.
There was no tears falling down Aisley's face whatsoever. We talked the whole day before, and the whole next day that he died, until he went into a coma, which he did very quietly. And then the day after, when he did die, there was this strange thing that happened again with the curtains. Very still day, and the curtains blew out across the room, and there was a great peal of thunder, which was, I think, the gods greeting him.
Rotten as I am in 1,000 ways, I have been chosen by the gods to bring to earth the basic word in which mankind will work for the next 2,000 years or so. I assure you the world is ready for this move.
The great beast died in 1947, and for a decade it seemed all his ideas had died with him. But then his do-what-thou-wilt philosophy found a new home with a generation that was experimenting with free love, drugs, and alternative beliefs. Crowley had pushed the same boundaries 40 years earlier. He was now a 60s icon. John Lennon acknowledged him as a personal hero by putting him on the front cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. Drugs guru Timothy Leary went tripping in Crowley's footsteps.
It's a great trip.
And the Rolling Stones were drawn to him by the underground filmmaker Kenneth Anger.
The Stones found Kenneth Anger, who in turn introduced them to the world of Aleister Crowley, which at least for a time seemed, heaven sent's probably the wrong word, but certainly seemed to suit the direction they were heading, which was unquestionably infernal.
The Stones' flirtation with the dark side was brief, but since the 60s, the occult has seen an explosion in popularity. There are now thousands of occult websites on the internet, with many dedicated to the great beast.
For devotees of Crowley, it's possible to certainly see a lot of the things he predicted, prophesied, as having come to pass. Certainly Christianity's grip over what we can and can't say, what we can and can't think, what we can and can't do, is diminishing.
Today, Crowley's followers believe that he was a true prophet because he foresaw a society that has now embraced ideas of sexual and spiritual freedom. Others are not so sure.
I think today modern occultism sees a very watered-down version of Crowley. They gloss over some of the atrocious things that he did, and they just want to see him as a benign a humanist, somebody who said, let's be free, let's go with the flow. And it is to deny an awful lot of evilness that happened in his practices. We should be open and honest about Aleister Crowley.
Crowley may have done some extreme things in his life, but was he truly evil? Does he really deserve his reputation as the wickedest man in the world?
Crowley never called himself the wickedest man in the world. From a fairly early age, Crowley wanted to see himself as the Great Beast 666, simply because he wanted to see himself as somebody who'd broken free absolutely completely from Plymouth Brethren and from his mother. Crowley was a victim of his own idea of Christianity. Probably, if Crowley had been born into a modern environment where he didn't have to be a Christian or anything of the sort, I think that half of his force would have disappeared because he wouldn't have had anything to brace himself against, to fight against, to hate.
Aleister Crowley's life was spent affirming his freedom. It began in defiance of his family, Victorian morality, and the Christian church. But the desire to exert his own free will became an obsession and a license to live his life to outrageous extremes. Crowley's beliefs ultimately proved to be as damaging to himself as they were to others.
He didn't seem to understand that a philosophy of do exactly what you want doesn't really work for 99% of people. If you took away all laws, all restraints and all the rest of it, his society would suddenly turn into a pretty horrible mess.
Crowley's attempts to establish a new religion left him bankrupt, friendless, and physically wrecked. But he has left an extraordinary legacy of a life pushed to the absolute limit.
Crowley ultimately is as magnetic and exciting as he is repellent. There are aspects of his character which are very difficult to admire or even tolerate. He was childish, he was unpleasant to many of the people who most admired him. But above and beyond that, Crowley was and is mythic, and there are aspects of this myth which are very, very positive. I find it difficult not to stand in awe of his appetite for life, his vigour, his determination to challenge himself and the world around him. Crowley wasn't afraid of anything or anyone.
Bury me in a nameless grave. I came from God, the world to save. I brought them wisdom from above, worship and liberty and love. They slew me, so be my grave without a name, that earth may swallow up my shame.
Masters of Darkness next Tuesday is on later at 11:05. There's a taster of that coming up in a moment.